All right, the E3 Coliseum continues. A couple great panels already. This next one is something really cool and special. It's an awesome conversation about games with an eclectic group of people that you might not expect to come together. I can't wait to hear what they have to say, and we have an incredible host to guide this panel. Please welcome Chris Hardwick.
Excellent. Thank you for coming out. This is a great panel, a great collection of humans. I'm going to introduce them one at a time. Everyone comes from a different space in the storytelling world, and we're going to talk about world building and why it's so important. And do you stick to rules? Do rules inform story? Does story inform rules? Certainly very important for video games because we personalize them so much. We're very passionate about them. I'm 200 hours into Zelda right now. I don't think it would have killed him for one fucking bit of rain climbing armor would be great. They thought not important. Fine, rains all the time, no big deal. So I still love the game. All right, so I'm going to introduce everyone, and then we'll talk for a bit, and then you guys will have a chance to ask some questions. So right now, I would like to introduce Mr. James Gunn, Guardians of the Galaxy, Slither, Super. Also, CEO of Gearbox, Rэнdy Pitchford! Borderlands! Tales from the Borderlands! And also head of transmedia for 343 Industries, Kiki Wulfkil is here as well. And live via satellite because he is orbiting the planet, Nil Degrasss Taison, I believe, is coming in. Are we piping him in? This is always, listen, whenever you hear via satellite, like 100% of the time, that goes perfectly. Yeah, it never fails.
At this point.
So I don't know where Neil is, but he'll pop in at some point.
It's not interpretable. It's
I hear him.
Complete static.
Oh, no, I don't know if he knows we hear him.
You guys can hear me?
This is a recipe. This is like when someone butt dials you, I never want to hear the message. Never want to hear like, oh, I butt dialed that asshole. Like, I never want to hear that.
You gotta grab him by the supernova.
No, don't say. There he is! Nil Degrasss Taison. I just want him to go, show me what you got.
He's gigantic.
I know, Neil. Neil, you're on a map. Can you see us at all? Can you see us at all? It is the age of Neil. Neil with it. Thank you for joining us, Nil Degrasss Taison. Good to see you again. So, world building is...
I don't know if they can hear me.
We can hear you.
Oh, we can hear you.
I guess you can't hear us.
Okay, there's also a little bit of a time delay, so we just got to sort of feel that.
It's just,
The speed of light sucks.
it's just a 5-minute time delay. It's not a big deal.
It's the speed
The
of sound.
speed of
we're
light
dealing
so sucks. I'm communicating to you from Mars.
Yes. All right, so we'll start here. We'll talk about world building because everyone represents a different facet of storytelling. So let's start with James Gunn. Let's talk about. Are you giving a?
Justine down there. Yeah.
Oh, hey, what's up? How's it going, Justine? So let's talk a little bit about story building for film, and especially porting a comic over to a film. Do you start with the rules that you're building for the universe, or do you start with the story, and does the story inform what the rules are?
I don't think there's any beginning, and I don't think there's any right or wrong to it because everybody's process is different. I also think that everything is a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I know for me, when I first was pitched Guardians of the Galaxy, it was something that my first hearing of it, I thought it was not a good idea. I thought it was a talking raccoon with these strange characters. I thought it was too weird. I thought it sounded to me like when they first pitched to me as if it was Bugs Bunny in the middle of the Avengers. And I didn't think it was something that was going to
That's not a bad idea, by the way.
Well, it could be in Space Jam 2 with the Avengers. But as I was driving home, and I knew the Guardians from the comics, and I really liked them, but I just didn't think it was something that was going to fit into the Marvel Universe. But as I was driving home, I thought, okay, well, let's just, take a moment and think about this. And I thought, if there was a such thing as a talking raccoon, what would it be? How could it come to be? If it really existed, how could it come to be? And I found the answers to those questions were actually these incredibly sad, answers. That if there was a creature that was, screwed with, experimented upon, turned into this creature, that he was really a sort of Frankensteinian monster, Frankensteinian.
Yeah, I like it. Go with it.
And a very lonely, sad creature. And to me, that was the foundation of the entire Guardians of the Galaxy Guardians verse, was that moment of realization that, you could build upon that rule. So that rule, for me, is at the center of everything. It's, the fun of Guardians. They're taking these outrageous, ridiculous pulp fiction concepts that really don't make sense, and then trying to make sense of them. Why does this exist? Why does that exist? In the second movie, I have a living planet played by Kurt Russell. And for me, that was the same question. If there was a such thing as a living planet, how could it exist? So it's always building those blocks one at a time. And for me, with Guardians, I have hundreds and hundreds of pages of the different cultures. What do they believe in? What are their values? What is for the Ravager, for our culture, we think of basically sex and luxury. That's all our technology is geared towards, sex and luxury. I think in the Ravager culture, it's a sense of touch, it's feel. So even though they have the technology to create spaceships that are much more efficient in certain ways, they're into the feel of it, just like somebody loves driving a Ford Mustang and feeling that engine. So I'm always thinking about that stuff, but it is within the construct of a giant pulp space opera, not really a science fiction movie.
So do you feel like when you're watching something and you feel the disconnect, where you just feel like, I'm not into this, I don't believe the world, they're breaking all their own rules, do you feel like that was just the function of, kind of building off of what you said, how you ask questions? You feel like they just didn't ask deep enough questions to understand the answers that provide the foundation for the rule set for that world?
I feel like oftentimes storytellers will tell a story point at the sake of the internal validity of the story. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't so much bother me if things, sometimes break the rules of physics, break the rules of science, as long as that's consistent within the story itself. In fact, I love that.
I know.
Well,
ladies and gentlemen, your new meme.
Well, listen, we're telling space, they're stories, they're fables, they're not, I do like trying to be as scientifically valid as possible, but there are times when, there are stories that don't, fit within that.
Yeah.
However, it needs to be internally valid. It needs to follow the rules that the story itself set down. And it can't, I love the movie District 9. But when District 9 is a documentary for most of the movie, and then all of a sudden we see behind the scenes where we're seeing characters that don't have cameras on them, it drives me, I can't enjoy the movie. I simply cannot enjoy the movie because it drives me crazy. There's one guy, me and that dude.
Someone was brave enough, but he still was like, oh, just me.
And it's hard, when you're a screenwriter and a director, it can be really hard because you're like, oh my God, I have this idea for this great scene, but it breaks Rule B that we set up earlier. And for me, I will never break Rule B as long as I know what it is. Now, I've made mistakes, and people have pointed them out to me, many times. But for the most part, if I know a rule is there and I know I'm breaking it, I will not do it for the sake of the story.
So Nil Degrasss Taison, who's been presiding over these proceedings.
The wizard.
Here he is. Wait, keep doing that. Keep doing that, Neil. I hope I got that. So Neil understands literal world building. He understands world building in the actual universe, if presuming that we're not a simulation. So what is it, Neil, especially being someone who will watch things and say, that wasn't entirely accurate, or the stars were off, and that, how important is real world physics to you, like that kind of world building, especially now that you're embarking on your own game, Space Odyssey? How is that important, and how is that informing the type of product that you're making?
So first, that's an important question. Let me first assert that I'm not as obnoxious about it as people want to think I am in terms of pointing out what a game or a movie might get wrong. And let me begin by talking not about world building, but about world destroying. So in Star Wars Force Awakens, they had this sort of updated, updated Death Star where it could suck the energy out of a star and use that to destroy planets, more than one at a time. Was it a half dozen? I don't remember the number. And the reason why I'm citing this example is if you calculate how much energy is contained in a star, if it took all of that energy, it could destroy 1,000 planets. So somebody missed that calculation where the real physics could have further...
The fuck, JJ?
Could have made it...
Why don't you blow up 1,000
could have made
stars?
it much more deadly.
That's Gary Whitta.
Oh, it was Gary. It was
Yeah.
Gary Whitta. Yeah. What's Gary?
So- Wait. So I don't have the patience for people who say, I don't want the laws of physics to constrain me, because in fact there's so many cases where the laws of physics liberate you, and I just want to just put that on the table. So now we talk about world building. The laws of physics. Look at how many hours we spend in front of these games, especially you, Chris.
Yes.
So, wouldn't it be nice if you learned something about the actual universe in all of those hours that you spend? So the goal here is to get the laws of physics as we know them and as they manifest in the real universe, and then give you access to these laws of physics in such a way that you have the power to build planets, to build stuff on planets, to build weapons, vehicles, and it's all operating under the accurate expression of the laws of physics. And so this is, well, consider, do you remember, I'm thinking of two films. I'm thinking of the first Hulk movie and Catwoman. When the Hulk and Catwoman...
You might be the only person thinking about those.
No, I'm thinking about those
thinking
also
about
right
them now.
now.
Now
I
I'm
was
thinking
just, my mind was wandering.
But do you remember when they jumped? In each of those two movies, it just didn't feel right. Something was wrong, and you knew it. Even though you were not calculating the ballistic trajectory of a green person through air, you knew it was false, okay? And so a part of me wants to honor what we know you should be feeling when the actual laws of physics are operating. And then once you have this power, run with it. And I'll tell you, for example, we have thousands of exoplanets in the catalog right now where we have some basic information about it, but not total information. All right, we know that some are in the Goldilocks zone. It could sustain liquid water, but does it? Will it? Does it have life? Okay? And by the way, there is no understanding of chemistry without physics, and there's no understanding of biology without chemistry. So once you have these laws of physics in here, you can create anything. Ow. Sorry. You can create anything.
That was a demonstration of Newtonian physics.
Yes, it was. Sorry.
Newton's first law, I think.
So
Newton's
that
law.
is the goal.
That phenomenon you're talking
And
about.
by the way, I just want to add, before we send it back to the panel, I just want to add that the least interesting command you can give an engineer is to say, there are no constraints. Do whatever you want. Well, those are not the seeds of creativity. The seeds of creativity are you tell the engineer, well, we have this much fuel, you have this much payload, you can only go this fast here, but faster over here, and you got to come back and you only have this much food. Go. And then full creativity gets expressed in the face of these constraints. And so I don't think of the laws of physics as constraining. I think of them as liberating.
Excellent. And you
Absolutely. what I was going to say was that phenomenon you were talking about, though, where we kind of have this innate ability based on our expectations to detect whether physics are simulating correctly or not. Like when we see a character in CG jump impossibly, our brain kind of rejects that as not right. But that same phenomenon, though, also kind of forces us in some cases when we're creating entertainment to break the laws of physics. It's why all spaceships in fiction tend to fly like airplanes instead of actual spaceships. Real spaceships don't need to bank with the wind.
Yeah, they can't.
They can just rotate and keep the trajectory going.
Yeah.
But our mind rejects it because we're used to seeing airplanes.
But also in deep space, you wouldn't hear a ship go.
Right. And there's no friction.
But for the audience, and I feel like that's.
But you also wouldn't hear a musical score playing over everything. So
In my mind.
But that's sort of the agreement that we have as as fans of things. Like, okay, so yes, I understand the Hulk can't jump across a state. Like a Green Man couldn't jump across a state. However,
are you racist against green people?
No,
why can't green people jump that
they
far?
can.
Yeah, but what the thing is with CGI, and I know because I have to deal with this for hours and hours and hours. One of the most difficult things to get into the completely CGI characters is the sense of landing and jumping. It takes a lot of work. You see some fabulous movies with fabulous CGI where they cannot get landings right. And it's something that we spend a lot of time doing. And it's a lot of times you'll see these CGI superheroes who they're jumping and they're just like bloop and they're up in the air as if they've just used the tips of their toes to do that, which of course is impossible. But and landing even more so because people pay less attention to it.
There's a lot of inertia going on in real life. Like even our cheeks will just sag a little bit if we jump off the couch. But in CG, it's so much more difficult to simulate those things. And in a video game,
then when you're dealing with
when
a
we're
character
doing this stuff in real
fur.
time, oh my God,
Yeah, but at
it's
some
impossible.
point, right, you just have to, there's a believability call, right? Like, I like physics. I don't maybe love physics as much as Neil. But at some point, you're just going to play in what feels right because these scenarios don't exist, right? For us, we tried to base a lot of our human factions in the UNSC very much in what we understand today, because moving that forward doesn't mean those rules change. But when it comes to creatures who have to move and have features that don't exist, you maybe start with what's real, but then you go to what feels believable.
Well,
I
think
you
that
start playing with tricks to make it feel like something your body and eye doesn't reject.
There are certain times when things look, in all respect, there are certain times when things feel wrong when you're creating CGI,
and they can be completely
or even
right,
when you're dealing with stuntmen and wires and things like that. There are times when things feel wrong, but they actually are right. Or even with, the first movie I ever made was a movie called Romeo and Juliet.
Yes.
And my brother was supposed to get punched in the face by my friend Val, and he went and he punched him in the face, and he actually punched him in the face. And he broke his nose, which was what he was supposed to do in the movie. And the sound that happens when you break a nose is kind of like this weird popping sound. And as much as we had a great recording of that popping sound, but it didn't sound right when you watched it. Yeah. Now that was real, that was what it was, but to make the scene really work, and it is probably one of the greatest movies of all time. To make the scene really work, we put in another sound that was more like the sound you would expect a breaking nose to make.
That's an interesting point, though, because that is definitely a product of our collective consumer experience, just getting it wrong for so long because they had to make some sort of a noise that we were programmed to think, oh, when you hit someone, it goes, and it doesn't. So, I guess you don't feel like there's a responsibility like, no, this is how it really is. You really want to make sure that people, because that's just part of the agreement you have with the audience.
I feel like it's my responsibility to, first of all, my responsibility is number one and all as a storyteller. Yeah. So for me, physics is a tool to make things more believable. And the more I can involve real science in a movie as pulpy and space fiction-y as Guardians, the more believable people will feel inside of it, and it'll work better. That's my number one thing. My number two thing is, as we all know, we're living in a time when there is a siege on science and scientific belief. And that somehow it has become for reasons unknown to me, a political belief to believe in science, which seems ridiculous. So I do feel some sense of responsibility to the world and to the consumer to keep taking steps forward towards making things more scientifically believable, and to just make a statement that I myself believe in science and that it's an important thing for us all to believe.
Well, I do think they're two slightly different conversations in the sense that, if you're making something and you want to tie it to real world science versus, I think people will, as long as your rule set is strong enough and you stick to it, I feel like you can create any rule set that you want. Like obviously I think Neil's preference in a lot of cases would be that it be more toward real science, but you can build those worlds as long as you can explain them, because I think people, the gap of disbelief is in as much as you give them the rule set and follow it. When you break it, what you're saying is, well, these rules weren't really that important, or we just didn't really see it through all the way, or fuck you. You know what I mean?
Like, you're talking about You're talking about internal consistency.
I'm talking about internal consistency, and I think people will believe, as long as you are very clear about what the rules are and you follow those rules, you can bend those rules, and I think you can even break them as long as you come up with a really good fucking reason for why you're going to break those rules.
Sure.
And if you don't, it feels disrespect. As an audience member, it feels kind of disrespectful.
About fiction?
Yeah, we're talking about fiction. We're not talking about actual science.
Yeah, so just a moment ago we talked about fiction. Of course, fiction, bad fiction is interactions of characters that no one finds convincing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everyone you know who has that personality would not behave in the way you just wrote that into the story. And so I'm agreeing with the comment earlier that even fiction follows certain rules, and you want to stay consistent within those rules, otherwise you'll just lose your audience entirely.
Right.
And so I have no problems with internally self-consistent rules, and in fact, that this entire gaming community, the whole geekosphere, is going to hold you to those rules.
Yeah.
We're part of the geekosphere.
They're going to tell you. Yeah.
Well, my things are, I think like you were talking about your number one, your number two. My number one is I tend to put information, like the audience has to know what the hell is going on. They have to understand, and if you've done a good job, then they'll like it. But if they don't understand what's going on or what you're trying to communicate, then you lose. So that's the highest priority. Then it's entertainment. But third is plausibility. It has to be on the list. It's definitely there. But I always put information and entertainment a little higher than that. I know that when I get behind entertainment and I'm on that team, I'll forgive certain things. For example, fans will tell us better than the story did why it is that the performance of the Millennium Falcon can be measured in parsecs instead of speed, right? A parsec is a measure of distance, right? So Niels had fractures because if you're going to talk about how fast your ship is, you don't talk about that in terms of it made the Kessel Run in under 12 parsecs. But then fans will say, no, you see the Kessel Run, it's about optimizing your path, so distance is the metric. It's about getting around the black holes and shit.
And those are fun. Those are fun debates to get into.
But the fans will work for you if they like your entertainment.
Absolutely. They will write their own narrative, and that's the sign of a really good property. And so when people really start, becoming engaged and figuring out, other than like, oh, when they were writing it, people weren't that sciencey, and parsec sounded like a cool word, so they just threw it in the thing.
And that's the truth. That's the truth.
Which is the true boring reason, but it's fun that people build an narrative around that. But, with Halo, with so many successive iterations of Halo, do you find like, well, we want to add rules, or we want to sort of take rules away, or we want to, like, how do you expand each time? Because obviously, every time you put something out, there is an expectation like, oh, well, this is going to be a better thing than the previous thing, because it's a new thing.
Yeah.
So how do you keep that up with a property that has been going on for so long?
Yeah, I mean, there's rules and then there's canon, right? And they're a little bit different, right? Because the rules are sort of the underlying foundation of how the universe works and what is possible to happen or not possible from a simulated physics perspective or new science perspective or space opera science perspective. And then there's canon, which is what are the stories that you've told, what are the backstories, what do people understand about characters, and can a character suddenly go from being male to female, or do you change the chronology of something that happened in the past? And that one's tricky, right? Because canon serves a lot of the same purpose, which is provide understanding of the universe so that when you add to it, you know what you're building on. On the other hand, if there is a good reason to break canon and it is a better experience, we will always have that conversation, right? And in some cases, we will say, we have broken canon because of X, Y, Z, it has to be meaningful. And in other cases, we'll retcon a little bit, and we'll play, so Frank O'Connor, who's the franchise director on our team, is a master spackler, right? So sometimes we'll have big holes in our backstory.
I like that
or
term.
in a universe.
Yeah,
it is seamless and smooth spackle. But there are times when, especially when you have so many stories, you break your own story, right? And you don't mean to.
I had to face this yesterday.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm writing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and and I told Chris I finished the first.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
I finished the first draft of the treatment yesterday, which I'm excited about. I feel really great about. But there's one little thing that I had in the first movie. Now, there's canon, Marvel MCU canon is crazy.
Yeah.
And then there's, and I'll get super geeky for 2 seconds. There's the 616 universe, which is the Marvel Comics universe, which people get hung up on that canon. And then there's the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which has a separate canon, which is inspired by, but not exactly the same as the 616. And I did something in the first movie of Guardians where it was in the background, but it's distinctly there, and people know that it's there. And I'm like, God damn it, I don't, because I have a really good storytelling reason for breaking that canon, and I stayed up last night figuring out if I'm going to do it or not. I still don't know.
Just don't lie about it, right? Like, don't try and hide it.
Let's vote.
It's like
Should I break canon or not?
Well, mostly, yeah.
This guy says no. This guy
You
says,
say that now. What was the thing?
Neil has something to say on that.
What was the thing in the movie? What was the thing? Maybe our collective genius in the room can help you solve it without having to break canon.
You want to crowdsource your decision?
I'll tell you. I'll actually tell you. I won't tell you the specific thing, but I'll tell you the general thing. In the first movie, there is the mugshot sequence where the characters go through and they're being, going through the mugshots. They're having their picture taken, and the Nova Corps has information about each of the characters coming up on their little their machinery. Yeah. Now, those things are something that your average viewer doesn't see at all and doesn't read, but there's a lot of background I put into those things about who they've worked with, where they're from, what's going on, and it's one of those things that I'm thinking about changing.
But see, that's amazing though, because that is.
But this guy will get beat the shit out of me at next Comic-Con.
No, you're good.
Somebody's gonna stab me.
You're good. That information source is unreliable. They just have bad information.
That's good.
But that type of detail in world building is so appreciated by people who, because you might just appreciate something on the surface, but when something is that rich and has that much dimension and that much, and informs things that, I would say for anyone who's really trying to understand how to craft a perfect world, just watch all of Breaking Bad. It is a perfectly self-contained story that sets up, came out before a lot of you were born. But it perfectly sets up the rules, it bends them. They constantly set up these story points that you go, how are they going to get out of this? And not only do they get out of it, but it's the only and perfect way.
Yeah.
And things that happen in the first season get paid off like several seasons later. And so it's that kind of really detailed story building and world building that I think true fans really do.
And that's how you respect your fans, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
That's how you pay back to the fans who are investing the time and the energy to care.
Right.
So,
Well, I think that if you really love what you do as a creator, or as a world builder, or a storyteller, you're a fan of that world that you're
Exactly.
creating.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I often, and this is a strange thing, and it's a strange thing to say out loud because it sounds insane, but I think of myself as a journalist. And the journalism that I'm writing is just writing down these stories of a talking raccoon and a tree and this, because there is an element where I just kind of sit back and I kind of watch these things occur. And then I have to arrange them in such a way, but it really is existing as an audience member and allowing myself to be fully creatively in that space as I am witnessing what is happening and just writing it down and then sharing it with everybody
So I just want to make sure, because we have about...
But can I add something here?
Sure.
Sure. So I think, was it Mark Twain who said, if you're a compulsive liar, you have to have a very good memory?
Right.
Was he the one who said that?
Probably.
Something.
Because
Sounds
if
like-
you
sounds
only
like
tell
it.
the
No
truth...
way we'll ever be able to find out, I guess.
Yes.
If you only tell the truth, then you don't have to remember anything because it's just always the truth.
Right. Yeah.
So in the world building, every step you take away from what is the natural order of the universe, you would then have to remember every one of these details all the way down the line to stay consistent with that. So dare I suggest that if what was going on were fundamental physics but still exotic, as long as you stick to the physics, you don't have, it's all there. You can be 10 seasons down the line and you will make decisions and worlds and shapes and things, and you don't have to remember what you happen to have invented at some other time, because it'll be consistent with how the universe intended it to be.
Yeah, well, especially if you like sci-fi too, though, because I think any Doctor Who fan has a bit of like, oh, okay, I guess they're doing this now. Sure, it's a fixed point in time. I'll accept that. Like you, because your relationship to, or Rick and Morty is another perfect example of like, how do Justin and Dan keep all these insane rules in place? And
Yes.
I always use Guardians as an example for, so like the Mummy just came out this weekend and it didn't do what they had hoped it would do. And so then they always do these ridiculous breakdowns like, oh, maybe it's Tom Cruise or maybe people don't like classic monsters. And I always go, fucking just make good movies. Like just look at Guardians. You know what I mean? Like if you, Guardians, and I know it's a very simple thing to say, it's an oversimplification, but on paper, Guardians should not have made $1 billion according to their rules. Like, not everyone knew what it was. It was, untested, film stars, basically. And you essentially broke every rule that Hollywood follows, and it was one of the biggest movies of all time. And so I just feel like if you make good things that have good detail and good story,
that's the only rule that I can live by as a filmmaker, is to make it good. That's all I can do. But that isn't always true, because if you saw, Edge of Tomorrow, which was
a good movie.
One of Tom Cruise's, was amazing movie, and also didn't do very well.
Right.
Did very, very
because they didn't know how to market it because it was sci-fi Groundhog
But
Day.
I mean, it's a great movie.
Yeah.
It's a great movie.
You didn't know what it was.
You
You were
know?
just like, oh, it's another Tom Cruise in the not too distant future movie, and people just didn't really understand that the story mechanic was really compelling.
There's a lot of good movies that don't get seen, and then there's a lot of bad movies which are making over $1 billion like in a few weeks.
Right.
So it's a difficult thing.
Well, I want to have some time for audience questions.
Wait. But then, how are you defining bad movie?
Right?
No, excuse me. No.
Well, you got us.
Wait.
How am I? Well, let me
Because
just,
wait. Because you can't apply different rules to movies than you can to your games. You will define a successful game by a game that sells well.
True.
And you're happy
good,
and you'll
bad,
boast
and
of what you've
successful.
infused in it to sell. So now you're getting on the case of movies that you all agree are bad but sell $1 billion.
Well, I don't think
They're
that's...
successful.
wait a second, Neil. I never got on the case of. I never said anything about
Fight!
I never said that. I believe that there are good movies and there are bad movies, and I mean they exist.
He is much bigger.
And if you want to go by just the very basic thing about what an audience feels about a movie after they see it, at least go by that. And there are movies which people are walking out of unhappily, and they don't like the movies, and yet they go to see the sequel because the promise of the next one is there. And the trailer works, and they're tricked again. Now, that may be stupid, but it happens. But at the very least, a movie is, for me, I believe a good movie or a bad movie is what I think it is, and what I enjoy, and what I think is well put together, and what isn't, But But I think that other people don't enjoy movies, and they're tricked into going to see them. And there's other movies they do enjoy, and they don't see.
But there is something that's extra special about a good sticky thing, where it's like a movie or a game, or like Borderlands, or like Portal 2, or BioShock Infinite, or Halo, like whatever it is that sticks with you, and there's just like an extra bit of a quality to that world that you want to inhabit.
If only there was a formula. If only we could just.
If only there was a way to. But I
really
want to get some audience questions so people here can get some of this stuff that
Can
they
I
want.
ask the first question?
Sure.
I want to know what video game or film passes the Nil Degrasss Taison test.
Oh, I know what he's going to say. I know exactly what he's going to say. I know what you're going to say.
I thought The Matrix 1, of course, was brilliant in its self-consistency, except for that one little bit about humans having to serve as part of the energy source of the Matrix. That violated all known laws of thermodynamics. But other than that, you know, I just thought they
Kinda like
thought
the
that
foundation
through
of the whole film.
brilliantly, beginning to end.
Excellent. So he liked The Matrix. I thought you were going to say The Martian. I know you like The Martian too. So let's ask. Yes, you sir. Do we
No,
have
but
a
The Martian is not didn't go anywhere other than real physics.
That's true. Do we have a microphone for this gentleman up front here?
Mark Watley got home. He got home.
Hi. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Rhino, and I'm from Iraq.
Hello. Welcome. What is your question?
Thank you. My question is, there's one issue that the video game industry and the movie industry is suffering from these days. It's the lack of originality and the repetition of the same stories and concept, and the fear of trying to go into new territories. So, for example, there are so many ancient civilizations that we don't get to explore in video games, even though they are very valid and they need representation, like Sumerian, for example. And there are so many games which repeat the same concept over and over and over in every game and resort to adding multiplayer in order to make the game engaging without presenting anything new. So how do you think we can solve these issues? And is it our fault as fans for buying these content? Or is it the fault of the directors not being efficient enough? Or there's budget issues or lack of research?
I've got an answer for you.
Thank you.
And I don't think it's ever the only. Honestly, I don't blame. I mean, you can't blame people for what they. The only thing that I blame people for bringing to power is the Kardashians. Other than that, everything else, like you can like. What
There's
you
another.
Like.
There's somebody else. There's somebody else. I blame the people for bringing to power.
There's one other. I can't think of. I don't know. Maybe.
I have an answer for you. It's the same reason why I became a.
You almost jumped out of your thing. Yeah. There's one other guy. I'm sorry, Rand.
No, it's okay. It's the same reason why I became a creator. If there's something you think deserves to exist in the world, you can't count on other people trying to make that exist. Everyone's trying. All creators are going to create whatever they want to create, whatever they think their art should be, and that's foundational to any artist. So if you think there should be something that needs to exist, you should become an artist. You should create
that's
it yourself.
a great piece of advice. Because that's where you feel like there's a gap there. You feel like there's a hole there that's not being serviced. And if you're passionate about it, it's very likely that there are, X number of other people who are also passionate about that. So if there's any way that you can figure out how to manifest that in some way, I feel like that you have a responsibility to do that if you feel like it should be in the world. I think that's a great place to start. Why isn't this? Oh, well, maybe I wonder if I could make that thing. So if that informs you in any way or helps, then maybe we will see you here next year, hopefully up on the stage. Do we have any other? Yes, you. Whoever, yeah, that guy right there on the end.
My name's Zach. I don't know if you guys were subconsciously talking about DC when you said keep getting tricked and over seeing their movies. But Mr. Gunn, I have a question for you.
I wasn't. I was talking about something else. Think about it for a second.
All right. Well, I know the Telltale Guardians of the Galaxy game, the first episode came out really recently. I was wondering if you had experienced that at all, and if that has had any influence on you writing Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
I have not played the Telltale Guardian. The only interaction I had with the folks that made that game were that they came to me and said, these are the songs we're going to use. Are these songs that you're planning to use? And are they okay for you to put it within the Guardians universe? And I said yes.
Yeah, those
so
are
that
definitely
was it.
Great choices. I actually loved the soundtrack to the game. I listened to that almost as much as the Volume 2 soundtrack, which was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Where's the microphone? How about, this guy right here in the third row. Yeah, yes, you, sir. You, sir.
So I feel like there are very few things more important in life than storytelling. I think that's super important as far as history, telling history, so we don't repeat the same mistakes. Having such an ensemble of great creators on stage here, I would love to hear where you guys like to see storytelling go in the next few years. Where would you love to see it evolve to?
Yeah, it's really interesting, especially with VR, because I feel like you as a director, or any of you as directors of a story, essentially tell people like, look at this, go here, do this thing. But when VR, where you're putting that power in someone's control, how do you tell a story? How do you tell a story when there isn't really a linear story to tell? When someone can just wander around, essentially. So where do you see that going?
That hunch is kind of why I feel like in video games we actually haven't cracked the nut yet. I mean, on one level, interactive entertainment is this incredible new medium that our species has devised, and it's the first medium where the audience can actually manipulate the situation. It's the first entertainment medium that we've created that can do this, but at the end of the day, we're still learning a lot of our lessons in storytelling from like you. We're learning from linear media, and we haven't truly explored what the gift interactive is for us in storytelling. And I still think someday we're going to get our Citizen Kane moment, where this changes things for us, and we haven't yet seen it in interactive entertainment. And when we do, I think it'll be the most obvious thing in the world in hindsight. But the fact that we haven't seen it yet means we're still struggling to find it. And I wish I could be one of the guys that find it, but
there's a mismatch.
I'm hunting.
What do you mean?
I'm hunting.
Yeah, maybe there's a mismatch there because, right, in a VR environment or any kind of game that creates an environment, there is no story other than the story sort of you make, your adventure. And that's different from linear storytelling that would go on in a novel.
Correct.
And to be concerned that it is not that but should be, maybe is not where your energy should go. It should be setting up the circumstances where that becomes what is the experience. So, for example, a playground is not a linear place. The kids go run and they just go every which way, and they're having a good time. And take a look at the TV show Seinfeld. There's no story there. It's just you set it up, and then stuff happens.
What are you talking about?
And the entertainment.
Well, I'm getting the wrap it up sign because I know there's other programming here today, and there's still a lot of E3 to be had. So I would talk about this for 3 more hours. But as we're sort of winding this down, do you have like one bit of advice for developers out there or storytellers? And we'll sort of go around the 4 of you, and I'll start with you, Kiki. Just one really solid bit of advice that you kind of follow, or a mantra, or something you always remind yourself, or something that you live by as you're constructing these worlds and telling the stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think we look at it as a craft, right? And it's about giving a player a sense of place and an emotion, and what do you want them to come out of the experience feeling, and how do you craft every visual detail and everything you see and hear and what that player is doing so that they can leave that world just wanting to come back to it. And so we take every little piece of that moment to moment really seriously, and how do we create the space for people to play in and ultimately to feel.
Excellent. Randy?
My thing is that life is worth living because we can experience joy and happiness. If we couldn't experience that, there would be no value to us. But because we can experience joy and happiness, and we figured this out, where we can commoditize it, we can experience entertainment. If you're a creator, that's the most noble thing in the world. If you're a consumer, there's not only no shame, embrace it. It's what gives us, the joy and happiness we experience from consuming entertainment is what makes us human. It gives us our lives value. So I'm so stoked that there's so much love here in this room and at E3 and for all media. So yeah. Keep at it.
Great. James?
Oh, sum it up. I don't know. It's, I feel like I should answer this guy's question here because I am in a different world than these guys. And I think that now is, and this is outside of the context of gaming, but now is an incredibly important time in filmmaking. And How do people move forward? I think is by taking risks and being honest and being compassionate. I feel like the middle echelon film, the films that cost $30 to $50 million are almost dead. The only movies that drive cinema these days are spectacle films. And unfortunately, or fortunately, that's just the way it is. And that's the province I live in. But to make cinema exist, it's got to continue to take the chances that filmmakers took in the 1970s with movies like The Godfather and Rosemary's Baby, and these movies that were artistic and heartfelt and true.
Or Get Out,
and honest,
like Jordan Peele's
or Get
movie.
Out.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
be able to do that also within the system of the high budget spectacle film, because that's what brings people into a theater. And without bringing some creativity and honesty and difference to that, it's going to die. It really will die. And most of the movies that come out there are cookie cutter, and they are the same. And that'll make a little money this year, a little less money next year, a little less money after that. So to truly, to let movies survive, it really is on the part of the directors and the writers and the actors.
And then finally, Nil Degrasss Taison, any parting words?
Yeah, just quickly, in Space Odyssey, we want to first go to Proxima b, which is the nearest exoplanet to our solar system, but there are thousands more that are currently in the catalogs. And I fantasize that we will find one such planet, or you invent one in this game, that has the right orbital parameters that give you the climactic cycling that, for example, you find in Game of Thrones.
Oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you all right? Do you smell burnt toast? Are you okay?
So it might be that all these worlds that everyone is creating in all these various universes have counterparts in the real universe, such as some of you know that I found a star that represents Krypton for Superman. Some of you know that. It's an actual red star in the southern hemisphere. You can take some of our culture that we've worked so hard to build and extrapolate it out into the diversity that is our universe. And there's no limit of stories to be told or heard or explored there.
Excellent. I want to thank you guys for being here. I want to thank this stage, E3. I want to thank Kiki and Rändy and James and Nil Degrasss Taison. Enjoy E3. It's an amazing time to be making stuff and consuming stuff. There's so much for everyone. And make the thing that you don't see out there. Make it. I'm Chris Hardwicke. Thanks so much. Have a great week. Bye-bye. That was awesome.
It's great. Up, Val.
What's up? Sure.